So, welcome. Hi, I'm Dr. Kathryn Bingham, and I help high achieving, purpose driven women create life and work that they can't wait to wake up to. So, if you are in a season of transition, that could be empty nest, it could be burnout, or just a quiet, niggling thought about what now, what next, then this space is for you. Covering your bases highlights the what, the why, and the how to pursue purpose focused change that sticks. So here is the key. Let's come over here for a moment and switch the screens. Today's session, when we talk about covering your bases, there are the four bases. Think of baseball. I love baseball, so that was the metaphor I picked. Today, we're focusing on the home base, which is really our outcome and our results and the environment that we create. And this is the thought that I would hope that really triggers or inspires something for you in life and work, that you don't always need to add more to change your life. Sometimes it really starts with letting go. And what would you let go of if you believed that your next purpose was worth making room for? So let's talk about that. And today's guest, Cris Alsum, joins us to talk about making space. Cris is the founder of Simply Alsum Organizing. Simply Alsum, I love that. And the author of Lighten the Load, a step-by-step plan for decluttering and downsizing. So welcome, Cris.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I am going to stop screen sharing for a bit so that we can have our conversation. I'll bring that back up a little bit later. Um, so tell me a bit about your journey. I feel like making space is an important part of living our purpose. So what about that journey of yours led to your creating your organizing business and writing Lightening the Load?
You bet. So I have spent my whole career in office administration, starting right out of college as an administrative assistant, moving up. I was an executive assistant, office manager. I've always been involved in serving people and organizing stuff,
Mm-hmm.
information, schedules, stuff, whatever. So that's just how I'm wired and where I felt gifted to work. Um, During the pandemic, the company I was working for had a slowdown, and so I had some time on my hands, and I thought, I'm going to launch my organizing business. So that was in 2020. But my real purpose with my business took a big turn in 2022 when I was forced to drop everything. I live in Colorado, go back to Connecticut to help my parents move out of their home in
Mm.
kind of a crisis situation. So from I think it's time to moved was 6 weeks.
Wow.
And the second half of that 6 weeks was 3 weeks where I told my husband I gotta go and I don't know when I'm coming back, but I can't come home until they're moved. So whew, it was rough. And
Mm.
I saw how waiting until an emergency is not the best way to handle this. And trying real hard to stay in a home that really isn't meant for you anymore. In my parents' case, they were about 86 when this happened. Um, it wasn't a win for them. And it was a really painful, sad, hard process for both of us. And coming out of that experience just lit a fire where I want people to not wait so long. I want to
Mhm.
help them lighten their load sooner to make room for what matters most in their next chapter.
I
My
love that.
parents, yeah, they'd
I love
been
that.
retired in their home for 20 years, and they could have been going through their things, sharing their stories, finding future homes for things, and they didn't.
Mm. And I think about making space as addressing both that physical goal, the move, that's a physical goal, but there's mental goals. In your book, you write about finding our why and understanding our why and how it supports this undertaking of a decluttering project. I think it's almost a misnomer to say this is a decluttering project if it's about downsizing, like in the experience that you had.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that
Sure.
understanding our why portion?
Right. So, I mean, I like to work with people anywhere from empty nest and active retirees. That's kind of my niche because we've got some life to live. We've got some ways to serve our families, our communities, and we still have time and energy. And so I believe that as long as we're breathing, we have a purpose. We've got something to be doing. And with when you're buried by stuff or paralyzed by fear of the future, you're not living into that, whatever that calling might be for you. So I think it's huge because sometimes the why is, oh my gosh, we have an emergency move. And that's when we do a declutter downsize fast. But I want to back way up where you're 5, 10, 15, 20 years from moving or downsizing, but to make space in your home. Like you said,
Mhm.
both mental space, sometimes it's physical space.
And I I found a book. I'm going to show everybody your book, by the way. Let's just showcase. This is Lighten the Load that we're going to be talking about here as we're having this conversation with Cris. But I had an experience similar that in 2021, my father-in-law passed, and again, way out of state. Like we're living in South Carolina, and his home was in Phoenix, in the Phoenix area in Arizona. And uh, I had to drive across the country. There was a lot going on, way more than we want to spend time with. And I discovered as, I was let into the property, I mean, he had had health issues. And so he had, um, I don't want to say hoarding tendencies, but there were things like there were mounds of cables and keyboards that had broken that were stuffed under a desk. There were, I mean, just things that people couldn't let go of. And I feel like, we think about having an environment that we have to let things go. We don't have, we're not free to often make mental decisions when the space around us doesn't support us, doesn't inspire us, doesn't nurture us. And so we can, in fact, make decisions early on around having our space be that for us, even if it's not for a downsizing for retirement. In addition, I had seen, because of that and because of other moves that I had engaged in, and my mother is now in our home, we're in the same home together. And so integrating all of her stuff, she's in that same time frame. She's 87. And the problem is she doesn't want to eliminate any of her stuff. It becomes a challenge because she's very emotionally connected to so many things, and maneuvering around that is challenging for families. In addition to your book, I came across the Swedish death cleaning. There's a book, Swedish death cleaning.
Gentle art of Swedish death
That's
cleaning.
it. That's it. And I'm like, so I bought it. Mom does not want to read that book. There is nothing there that inspires her. I'm like, it helps me to think about it. But
Mhm.
but I think families and even individuals who are in their homes alone need to have these conversations early on. So, the lesson I learned from my father-in-law's property was that I never want my kids to have to deal with what my husband and I, we each had to drive across the country at different points in time. I dealt with all the financial and the legal and the property and all the paperwork, and then he dealt with the physical, all of the belongings. And dealing with other family members in preparation for the sale of the property, and it was a really really challenging. I don't want that for my kids. Like I don't
And
want
that's
that.
why. That's your big why.
That's my why. My why is I never want my kids to have to look at my house and go, oh, I'm gonna die going through all of this. So let's talk about that piece, right? Clearing away belongings can take an emotional toll. So, how does that relate to you picked a great title, Lighten the Load. How does that marry up for people when they start to go through this process or think about it?
Yeah. I'm always encouraged. I always encourage people that want to talk about this. I say now's the right time. They say, when's the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago? When's the next best
Mm,
time? Is now. Well, when's the best time to declutter? It's not when you're moving to the nursing home in a month because you broke your hip and you can't live at home. It's now. Whether you're 45, 55, 65, 75, now's the time to start thinking about it. And some people might want to age in place and might be in a place where they can, and that's fantastic. I want to
yeah.
support that. Not everyone's going to leave their home before they pass, but everyone is going to die, and everyone's going to be leaving behind stuff that someone's going to have to deal with. So it's important to think about, again, it depends on where you're at in the stage of the journey. So I'm in my early 50s. After the move with my parents, my husband and I had the opportunity to move into a house that's on one level.
Yes.
And we did it like 3 months later. It was kind of crazy to do both of those moves in the first 4 months of 2022. But I said, if we want to age in place, now we're in that home.
Hmm.
And I recognize that's a privilege, but it was a very intentional decision because another story I wrote about in the book is my next door neighbor growing up. She lived to 104 in her home.
Hmm.
And that's great, but she had been intentional about planning it for 50 years so that that could happen. And she had family nearby and she had the finances to hire a live-in caregiver. Like there's a lot of things to consider, but everybody's going to have a different story. But the fact is, the thing that doesn't change is we're all going to die and we're going to leave stuff behind. And I don't like to focus on the dying. I want to focus on the living.
Exactly. And if we do these things early, if we think about these things early and we think about how our life improves when we're not burdened by too many things, right? It's about the living part and living vibrantly.
Mhm.
There's a whole different outcome if we're starting early. One of the other things that I really liked about the book is that I would say 50% of your book is your upfront preparation, finding your team, thinking about your why. What do you have to have in place? What are the elements of the emotional components of how you might begin going through? But then you have okay, now let's get to how to do it. So when you're helping individuals or families, whether it's through your book or in-person support, um, tell us a couple of key tips on how to successfully work through decluttering or downsizing. What do we have to know? What do we have to prepare for?
Yeah. Well, I'll just kind of quickly go through the steps of the lighten the load process. So we
Okay.
started with what's your why? And that can be anything from I got a diagnosis, we got to get out of this house, to my kids are gone and I want to make my home a vacation spot for my friends and family. So that means I need guest rooms that are clear. I
Mhm.
need living spaces that are clear. We host people in our home on the weekly because hospitality is my calling and how I want to serve. So that means I just want my house ready to go all the time. So,
Yes.
because I have friends that are like, I'm too embarrassed to have anyone over because of all my stuff. Well, if that was your why, then we would work on that. So it depends on where they're starting from and what their high value is, and then we go from there.
Yeah.
So the next step is to assess your situation. So again, it's similar to the why, but it's kind of like, okay, we got to talk about money, we got to talk about health, we got to talk about timing, we got to talk about these types of things. So kind of a big assessment because a lot of those factors will play into your decisions about what's happening next. And then after that, is the really hard one, which is confronting emotional obstacles. Because that is where people might get excited, but when the rubber meets the road, that's where people get stuck.
Yes.
Too hard. I'm overwhelmed. I can't give up this because of the memory or the guilt, or it brings up all kinds of stuff. Shame, um, childhood wounds, family wounds, um, all kinds of things. So the emotional obstacles is a big part, but again, it's part we got to deal with. If we're going to keep going on the process, we've got to deal with that.
Yes.
Mhm. And then the next step is to identify treasured items. So, we all have things that we don't want to part with. They're going to be, if I'm stuck in a nursing home room, this thing is going to be with me because it is so special to me. So, helping people through the process of identifying treasured items. Not everything is precious, not everything can be precious. And can I give a little show and tell?
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
my father was a collector of neckties. And I always, when I do workshops, I always ask, how many is a lot of neckties for somebody to say? Somebody might say a dozen, somebody might say 50, somebody might say 100. Okay. That seems like a lot of neckties. Well, my dad had over 2,000. 2,000. I mean, it was a deal. It was part of his life. He loved buying them, he loved wearing them. But what on the world are we going to do with 2,000 ties when they give up the house? So, this is what I do. I took a handful and I made myself a little quilt.
I love that.
So, this is my most treasured item because it represents my dad. And I picked ties that have patterns that, he did the crossword puzzle. There's lighthouses and boats, places we went on vacation. And it's like you can take this giant collection that you've spent your lifetime, and yeah, it's sad you have to let it go, but wow, like for me as the daughter, that's my most precious thing.
Hmm.
So it can't be everything. Like they collected all kinds of things, and I took a selection of one. Or this basket. My mom made this basket, and it's on my desk. I see it every day. There's
Yes.
just a few things because they can't all be precious. So, okay. And then after that is build your team, like you referenced before. This is hard work. It takes a long time and you need help. So whether it's your friends and or your kids or your neighbors or your church family or you're a professional organizer you hire, a state sale company, realtor, financial planner, there's all kinds of people involved in, especially if it's a downsizing to a move or
Hmm.
whatever. But we need a team or just an accountability buddy because, if you don't do the work, it's easy to not do it. This is hard work, but it's worth it. If you have a compelling why, you might just need some accountability. So that's my favorite part of my job is helping people stay motivated, encouraged, and keep going on the process for the long game.
I like that.
Yeah, and then after that we start getting practical. It's like prioritize your spaces. Okay, what's bugging you the most? Is it the kitchen counter? Is it the living room? Is it the closet, whatever it is, and you make priorities of what matters most because once you start doing this work of sorting your items, it's like a muscle. It gets stronger, you get better at making decisions. So, and I'll read the person. Some people are want to do something that's really bugging them a lot, but some
Hmm.
people need to start with a space that's not emotional. So,
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
tell it's going to be hard for them. I say, okay, let's start with under the bathroom vanity or a linen closet or something that might not hold a ton of
Or
um
innocuous. Easier to,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. It's like let's
Easier.
get started. Let's get started, start making decisions, and then we'll go to things that might be more emotionally charged.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Working up to it. Now,
Yep.
a lot of the time up till now, you have helped people not only through your book, but you've done a lot of local sessions and then flying some places to you've done in-person support. But I understand you will be launching a new course and some group sessions. Tell us a little bit about that upcoming.
Sure. Well, so after I released the book and I got some great feedback and people said, "Oh, that's helpful." And then they said, "Yeah, and it's on my shelf." I said, "I am not intending to add clutter to your home. I'm intending you to do this work." So I decided to create a online program called the Lighten the Load Project.
Okay.
So it's going to be a combination of recorded video lessons of really like building out the content of this book because the framework works and I want to just help people get it in their hands.
Hmm.
And there will be a workbook and there will be monthly live coaching calls with me. So we have that community support. We'll also have an online community through a private Facebook group. And if people really need some one-on-one, course members are going to be able to have access to me through office hours. So they can book one-on-one 15-minute sessions. If they're really stuck on something, we can talk one-on-one. So
Good.
it's a really comprehensive approach to helping people support them on this journey.
I love that. I love that. I'm bringing back up your contact information. Give me a second here. So, I really appreciate that you spent some time to walk through this today. And is there anything else that I didn't think to ask you or final thoughts that you want to add in for folks
Sure.
to know about?
Well, and then the last part of the project is to get to work, right? And
Oh,
so I have a
yes,
process that I train all of my clients on called the SORT process. And SORT is an acronym
that's
for
right.
save, offload, relocate, and trash. And I have that all written out in a handout along with the framework, the Lighten the Load project framework that I send out to people for free. So
Oh,
if
I
people
love
want to
that.
email me, Cris with no H at simplyawesome.com and just say in the subject line freebie, I will send them that PDF that has the framework as well as the sort process because I just really want to encourage people to get going.
I love that. I love that. So, again, here you go. These are some of the different ways that you can connect with Cris. Now, obviously, we're on a LinkedIn Live as we're recording today. You can connect with Cris. Again, look for Cris without the H, CRIS, Alsum, ALSUM, on LinkedIn to connect with her on LinkedIn. You can also find her website, simplyawesome.com. And she just shared her email, but here it is. Cris at simplyawesome.com. You can also find Lighten the Load available on Amazon. So, the first time I plugged it in, it didn't show up. I was a little freaked out. Then I plugged it back in. It was like, there it is. There
There
it
it
is.
is.
So
Put my name with it, it helps
you
too.
can in fact find it on Amazon. And there's the image, but you can, here's the book. It's easy to find. And what's great is it's really easy to use. It has like a field manual or workbook style that really is helpful to people who are just trying to gather their thoughts about the process. Let me switch to here. So, folks, thank you so much for investing time in yourself. The Covering Your Bases sessions offer inspiration, tools, practical actions for addressing life and work holistically as you work through and embrace that next chapter of life in work. If today's conversation sparked something for you and you're asking, what do I want now? You are not alone. If you'll DM me with the word next, I like yours is freebie. That's easy. Mine is next. Then I will share this PDF with you. It's Find Your Purpose. It has several reflection prompts that will help shape your thinking about what's most meaningful in life and work. And then the next thing I wanted to share with you is please join us next Tuesday, the 24th. We're shifting the time. I'm experimenting with different time slots 11, 12, and 1 p.m. Eastern so that we can kind of see where people are at and what works for most of the audience. Shel Shapiro is going to be talking about powerful profiles. So whether you are an individual who focuses on a career ladder and career progression, or whether you are an individual who's an entrepreneur or a business professional that you own your business, LinkedIn and other forms of social profiles really help you to share your professional brand in online spaces, communicate authentically, and invite engagement in support of your purpose. So um, do join us for the next Covering Your Basis. We'd love to have you. And remember, you deserve life and work that you can't wait to wake up to. So go forth and do great things. Thanks so much.